Hannah, and welcome back. Good morning, everybody, to everybody out there listening, and to those of you who are going to find us later on YouTube. Good evening, good afternoon, whatever time of day that corresponds to. So we're here at the beginning of a new quarter. Feels crazy to say we're in the second half of the year already. I don't know if you guys are like me, but I've got a real strong case of Corona time, meaning my entire conception of the time continuum has just not been the same since sheltering in place. Things that feel like they were just the other day were 4 months ago, and things that feel like they were 3 months ago were in fact last week. So I say all that to say we are overdue for having one of these showcases. There's been a lot of development in the market on new products and new technologies, and we didn't want to wait any longer to get some of these things in front of you. So let's dig in. Get my slides advanced here. So as always, let's start with a little agenda, talk about where we're going to head. Some trends and drivers behind new products, talk a little bit about why these things come to market, and then we'll dig into the nuts and bolts of what's actually new in the categories of inverters and modules, and a lot of what we're going to talk about today is storage. So without any further ado, I'd like to talk about what's new in the marketplace and why these things come about, what drives new products. Could be a variety of factors, could be a mix or a blend of factors. In general, we see kind of 5 buckets here. Code compliance, new codes and standards drive non-optional compliance with those codes and standards. So we don't have any of these this time around, but module level rapid shutdown is the crystal clear example of codes and standards driving new product development. Time savings and cost savings, those tend to go hand in hand, although not always in perfectly aligned order. Things that save time are valuable. Things that save cost are valuable too. It really just depends on installer by installer preferences and how do you make those trade-offs between hard product costs and I guess a little less hard labor costs. So where do you make those? Where do you personally make those trade-offs? Yield improvements we'll talk a fair amount about this today with some new modules hitting the market. Basically, how much more production and overall generation are you going to get out of these assets? And then install versus retrofit. As the market matures, we've got more and more installed base systems. We're going to see more and more products specifically targeting retrofits, repowering, updates, etc. And apologies, my VPN's telling me to log back in, so let's get rid of that. Product categories that we'll go over today: inverters and storage products and modules. I included this here because I think it's, for me as a product manager, it's very interesting to think about the average lifespan of an item. I got into solar from a very call it conservative or not quite so innovative field of electrical distribution, meaning circuit breakers, load centers, panel boards, etc. And in that industry, it's not uncommon to have really the core IP of a product last decades. When you're talking about the busing and the attach points and the circuit breaker architectures, those last for decades. So really in that space, we were looking at really kind of incremental improvements. The saying about better, faster, cheaper fueling, a lot of incremental improvements while maybe missing the bigger picture of product development was definitely true for that industry. Solar is not like that at all. Looking at items in our portfolio and the average age of them, not surprising to see electrical hardware and tools being, I guess, the longest tenured categories, meaning on average, these are the categories in which the products are the oldest or kind of stay on the shelf the longest. On the flip side of that, if we look at PV modules, this low blue bar here, on average, we're turning those SKUs over just about every year, which is crazy to think about. For us, we'll spend a couple months getting ready for a product, getting it on order, and the entire life cycle of the product from phase in to phase out being about a year. And really, my heart goes out to all those product managers who work at our suppliers who, toil and toil and toil for quarters to launch a product that, if they're successful, will stay on the shelves for, maybe 2 to 3 years. So shout out to all my colleagues out there toiling away on products for which the mature part of the life cycle is just really not long at all. So it really puts a premium and puts an onus on the product management efforts to get the right things to market and try to capture as many customers and installs as possible before they've got to develop the next new product. Really fascinating for me as a product management nerd. Reminder on code changes. So we won't talk too much about this, NEC 2017 and the 2019 TIA. I will bring up one point here around SunSpec membership. We're seeing third-party devices that were part of the SunSpec alliance and network, and now may not be. So I don't want to get too far into this, but if you're using call it third-party accessories or parts to make your string inverter code compliant, just make sure you stay on top of those things. Specifically with respect to California Rule 21, we've seen some inverters recently that were not recertified to phase 2 and phase 3, and we're seeing some in California specifically some challenges with oh boy, I don't know, call it aggressive code enforcement and dates and things. So please make sure you're double and triple checking. If you've ever got any questions on this stuff, drop us a line, give us a phone call, and we'll be happy to walk you through the latest. That said, let's get to the fun part and actually talk about what's new. So I got 3 product families I really wanted to focus on today because in my opinion, they're needle movers. They're needle movers for increasing the efficiency of your installations, increasing the amount of storage you can bring to bear on an installation, facilitating the ease of call it backup circuitry, and really providing a better platform for some of these grid-tie battery backup installations. So we'll focus on SolarEdge Energy Hub. That's the new platform from SolarEdge for all things residential energy storage. We'll focus on REC Alpha modules. So these are the new heterojunction technology modules from REC, which leverage a couple different technologies to really bring out cutting edge performance in 60 cell modules. And then finally, we'll wrap up with Generac Power Cell, which is a kind of a new combination of some existing technology that is doing some interesting things in the residential energy storage space. So that's what we're going to focus on today. We've got a lot programmed, so we'll just kind of hop into it. Let's get started with Energy Hub. For me, the easiest way to talk about this product is to kind of keep in mind the frame of reference of StoreEdge, and then we'll talk about kind of where they went from there. So StoreEdge is a inverter product that's been on the market for going on 4 years now. Originally launched as a 7.6 kW unit, for which they introduced a 3.8, and it's really wanting me to log into this VPN here. Let's see if we can get that cleared out permanently. So a 3.8 and a 7.6. It was an inverter in which the disconnecting means to the grid was inside the inverter. You could pair up to 2 batteries on one inverter, but paralleling inverters was a little tricky, and large systems was kind of off the board, and systems were really limited on their backup capability. So we have up here total backup capacity 20 kilowatt hours. That's total storage you could bring to bear on a single unit install. The backup power per inverter, not per battery, but per inverter, was 5 kW, actually 5 kVA. So really limited on that respect. And how this manifested itself for our customers, for installers working with homeowners, was you ended up having this, I call it Sophie's choice of, hey, you've only got 5 kVA. Are you going to power this? Are you going to power this circuit with your kitchen refrigerator on it, or are you going to power this circuit with, call it your, your TV and your entertainment system? Or, what's more important, the fourth circuit providing lights in your bedroom or lights in your family room? And it's been our experience that homeowners don't like having those conversations. When you start asking for trade-offs between things that every homeowner wants backed up, it just makes it that much easier for the homeowner to say, you know what, it's not worth it. We're going to stick with our grid tied system, or we're not. We're paralyzed by all this analysis, and we can't make a decision. So storage was and is continues to be a very successful product, but the market was craving more power. There's that there's that old adage from that sitcom in the 90s, Home Improvement. Everybody wants more power. So really, to be able to bring more power to bear on a system, they had to move the disconnecting means out of the inverter and somewhere that could control a lot more power with a single contactor. So the big change that fueled all of this was the ability to have a backup interface unit. By moving that disconnecting means and the paralleling means to a standalone piece of distribution equipment, you can strip out some of that capability out of the inverter. You can make the inverter more flexible, more efficient, and then you've got a built-in means for paralleling more than one unit. So before we dig into the inverters, let's talk a little bit about what makes all this possible, the backup interface. I haven't seen a great kind of trade name for this. I'm trying to get us all to use the term buoy because it's kind of a play on words of BUI. But mostly this is what keeps the system afloat. This is what keeps everything tied together, harmonized, and in sync. So this is the backup interface unit. It has a number of very critical components in there. In the lower right-hand corner is the energy meter. It's also got a 200 amp contactor that serves as an automatic transfer switch. It's got busing for paralleling of inverters. It comes in two different formats, and we've got a slide at the end that covers the part numbers. There's a 200 amp option with a main breaker included. There's a 200 amp option without the breaker that we're calling a main lug option. So depending upon your application, where you're interconnecting this device, and whether you're looking for whole home or partial home backup, there's a solution for everybody. Big part of the value prop on this BUI or in this buoy is one box. It's got an integrated auto transformer and energy meter. So, another part of the feedback from customers was, hey, this solution's great, but by the time I get everything installed with conduit and a gutter and a backup panel, it looks like a yard sale on the homeowner's wall. You've got one or two batteries that cannot be stacked depth-wise, have to be stacked, next to each other or on top of each other. So one or two batteries, a backup panel, a meter, an auto transformer, an inverter. It just gets to be a lot. So SolarEdge did the smart thing here, integrated those two components into the backup interface. Less clutter, easier install experience. There are terminals for up to 3 inverters, each capable of powering up to 2 batteries. So from this one 200 amp device, you're able to pair up to 33 kW of inverter capacity and up to 60 kilowatt hours of storage. That's with the current storage option of LG Chem Resu 10H. We've long been awaiting a SolarEdge branded battery that promises to deliver even more power for these systems. Also included, we've got a path for generator support, and again, this device now facilitates whole home and partial home backup. Whole home being the kind of the nirvana that we're all looking for, that helps us get around those choices of what can I afford to back up and what can I afford not to back up. So this is really the straw that stirs the drink with respect to this new platform. Is again moving the relays and the interconnection out of the inverters and into the backup interface unit. and I say move the interconnection. And obviously, the inverters are still going to have IEEE 1547 and UL 1741 protocols for de-energizing. Really, what I'm talking about here is the the mechanical connections that will disconnect under load. Your inverter will still do that, obviously, but the backup interface unit is rated as an ATS, and it's capable of islanding everything downstream to create a larger microgrid than the 5 kVA rated SolarEdge inverters were before. So not enough credit to the electrical distribution equipment here, what we used to call big gray boxes, but now comes in a more aesthetically pleasing white cover with some metering and monitoring functionality as well. The inverters. So I alluded to a couple things when speaking about the backup interface that will be brand new. First, let's talk about kind of what this is built off of. The new Energy Hub inverters leverage the very successful HD Wave architecture, which is both smaller in format and more productive. So you see here up to 99% CEC weighted efficiency, up to 90.8% round trip efficiency. So that round trip efficiency of PV into the inverter, wattage into the battery, back out of the battery, inverted to AC, that whole cycle up to 90.8% efficiency, up from 87. So some small improvements, but if you think about, what's 3.8% increase over 87, pretty substantial, and you're really trimming into the losses and making the system overall more efficient. Up to 200% AC to DC ratios. So by creating this system where everything flows through the backup interface and being able to bring more power to bear, we're also able to move that kind of maximum recommended AC/DC ratio higher now, because we've got a place for excess power to go. Any excess power that's generated that's not going to be used. Let me put it this way: any excess DC power that's in excess of what the inverter can invert can simply go straight into the batteries. So there's some really good documentation on this from SolarEdge on what's the incremental value of more DC wattage. Really gets into a couple things. You can really rationalize how much inverter you need on a given system, and maybe be a little more judicious on your inverter ratings. You can still sell really large systems. To kind of it all gets back to unit economics. You can still sell really large systems that are actually more productive now, because you're not throttled or limited by the inverter capacity. Allows for pairing up to 3 inverters for one backup interface. So this was a big drawback to storage, was that each inverter limited to 5 kWh, 5 kVA, and paralleling them was a challenge, let's say. Now you've got up to 3 inverters that can sync and be operated on one backup interface and can play harmoniously together. Big point here, not all of them have to be Energy Hub inverters. So this is part of the big promise of the Energy Hub architecture, is that on one backup interface unit, you can start with an Energy Hub hybrid inverter, and you can also add to that the traditional RGM inverters, so the non-hybrid inverters, to create a blended DC AC coupled architecture. If your storage needs are call it less than your PV production needs, you can really mix and match and get fine-tuned on how much simple grid tie production do you need, how much of that needs to be backed up, and it provides for a lot of flexibility down the road on retrofits, system upgrades, makes that whole kind of customer lifecycle discussion a lot easier. And pairs with this should say modular smart EV charger. So there's dedicated terminals for smart EV charging that now allows you to include that EV charger circuit in your call it backup panel a lot more easily and with a lot more control. So typically the way this would work before, if you were absolutely dead set on backing up your EV charger, you would wire that circuit into your backup loads panel. And then you're really at the mercy of the car charging profile and the other loads on whether or not you were going to overpower your inverter in a backup situation. So I've got an EV charger at home. It takes a 40 amp connection. It will pull up to 32 amps. Right there, we're basically over the output rating of a single SolarEdge unit. So for me to have backed up my EV charger, I would have needed to actually do some programming in my car to make sure that it doesn't pull more than a certain amount of amps, and just hope that in backup mode I didn't have other loads that would put the unit into overpower protection. So makes this a lot easier. The smart EV chargers respond to commands on power throttling and charge timing and cycles. So a lot more of a holistic solution for backup. And there's some products on the market, on the roadmap from SolarEdge, diversion loads, smart switches, et cetera, that really start to make this a lot more of an architecture and an ecosystem. We'll move now to REC Alpha modules. So it's hard to overstate, I guess, how different this module is from a lot of the typical modules we've seen in the past from REC and modules we see on the market currently. So heterojunction technology is really the foundation of this module, and we'll get into this in a couple of slides and what that means. But basically, technology to increase the amount of intercell connections, reduce parasitic losses, generate more power. They didn't stop there. They took a real strong look at the frame and how critical a component that was to the life cycle of the product, the output, as well as the upfront cost. So two lateral support bars to help kind of divert the load and increase the torsional rigidity of it. And they didn't stop with saying, hey, we've got better static load testing. We'll put it on the data sheet, and the proof is in the pudding. They really back this up with a product warranty. So for those of you that are not familiar with the REC ProTrust warranty program, it's a great offer for installers that provides them with the standard 25-year product warranty, the linear power warranty, as well as for installers that go through the online training program and certify themselves with REC, provides them for a 25-year labor warranty as well. So not only is your product warranted against failure, not only is it warranted for output, it's also warranted for the labor you would need to recoup in the event one of these modules fails and you need to replace it. Really going above and beyond to make sure that customers are covered with this product. Best in class voltage temperature coefficient. So if you're like a lot of people, yeah, that's great. That's 3/4 of the way down the back sheet of a data sheet. How important is that? I'd say that's fairly important. And the way that manifests itself is, if you look at a 300 watt module, they're never outputting 300 watts. They're either outputting much less than that because it's hot out, or in some edge cases they're putting out more than that because you've got greater radiance on a really cold day. So because of that factor, and the fact that I've yet to see any system that operates at 25 degrees C with good airflow kind of day in and day out, real world conditions exist. These voltage temperature coefficients begin to be very important, meaning you're going to have less loss at high temperatures. And it's going to be easier to string at low temperatures. You're not going to have these huge kind of swings between cold and hot. And the difference between a 0.26 and a 0.28 seems very small, but when you're dealing with extreme temperatures, ends up being pretty significant to the production of the module. Lower annualized degradation. So what this is going to mean is more long-term power, more output over the life of the system. We're not just in the business of selling upfront kW. Hopefully most of us are taking a long-term approach on this and thinking about, how's this system gonna respond in 5 to 10 years? How's it gonna produce over the lifespan of the install. So lower degradation, higher power after 20 years, and they're backing that up with a linear power warranty. So really the takeaway for me on REC Alpha is really putting their money where their mouth is on backing the product up with warranty, with linear power output warranty, really trying to make this easier for installers to sell to homeowners on the backs of more power, better warranty, and longer term horizon for these systems. So let's talk about heterojunction. And I will preface this by saying I'm not a physicist or an engineer of any sort. I used to make the joke that I'm not a doctor, but I stayed at a Holiday Inn Express last night. So let me preface this by saying not a subject matter expert, and I will try to explain this as best I can. For those of you who want more, tons of information out from REC. I'd encourage you to sign up for the REC Pro Trust warranty, and they walk you through some of this. Basically, let's talk about heterojunction though. We've known for a while now that all of those intercell connections on a module create parasitic losses. So in the days when I got into solar, we were selling pretty simplistic full cell mono products, meaning there were 60 full mono cells. 3-bus bar technology was popular at that time, meaning each one of those cells had 3 pretty substantial bus bars running right down the front of the cell, for which there's a couple really obvious, really obvious negatives, downsides to that. One is those bus bars took up a fair amount of space, so there's a non-negligible amount of shading on the cell itself. The next being because there's only 3 connections between each cell, each one of those connections has to handle a fair amount of current. We know that parasitic losses are a function of current rather than voltage. So pretty, relatively speaking, pretty high amounts of parasitic loss at each one of those connections. So that was, kind of solar as I knew it in 2012 when I got into this industry. Since then, we've seen a number of paths diverge to deal with that phenomenon. We've seen most manufacturers launch at a minimum a higher number of bus bars on their panels. So 5 and 6 are common now. You've seen companies like LG come out with technology called Cello on their Neon 2 line to really minimize the amount of bus bar that comes down the front of that cell, minimize the profile, and make sure that more photons hit the cell and fewer photons hit the bus bar. We've also seen LG launch a technology on Neon Arc called back contact, where they're putting those cell connections on the back side of the cell and freeing up more space for for more photons to hit the cell. REC really innovated when they came out with their twin peak technology, meaning half cut cells. And the thinking there is that if we make each cell smaller, we will make we'll increase the overall number of connections, yes, but less current will be flowing through each individual connection, and losses being a function of current will decrease the losses that way. However, you get to a point where you say, okay, well, if split cell technology dropped the losses by 2%, what if we cut each cell into fourths or fifths? And it's a bit of a slippery slope there. Instead, what was launched was heterojunction, which basically wraps the cell through a wire and film combination, and completely eliminates the need for soldering. So but basically taking this cell, wrapping it in a type of mesh for intercell connections, you're reducing the amount of parasitic loss by drastically increasing the number of connections between cells, and you're putting fewer weak points on the cell. So because you're not having to solder, you're not having to introduce a ton of heat to very specific targeted points of the cell, also reducing the likelihood of micro cracks in the future. So increasing the amount of production by taking the bus bar element out of it, You're reducing the weak points that come from soldering, and really overall reducing the parasitic losses, improving the current flow, getting really more production out of each and every cell. So how does this kind of manifest itself? What do the numbers end up looking like? And REC has given us some modeled production across a number of different install sites. So they're comparing here an LG Neon product, SunPower X Series, Panasonic HIIT, and then their own Alpha product. So you see here, and these are a pretty representative sampling of our customers, at least, across the country. The latest data I was looking at this morning from Green Tech Media is that California, once the 800-pound gorilla in the solar space, is now only 35% of forecasted installs for the year. And that's less a story of California shrinking than it is, these other states kind of catching up, and really, solar's taking off across the Sun Belt. It's no longer just a blue state phenomenon, which is great, but it also calls into play a lot more climates to take into account when looking at an example like this. So better production, in terms of yield, kilowatt hours per kW peak. And then at the bottom here, we see, what's the impact of reducing those parasitic losses, reducing degradation over the life of a module. So, we still see that upfront hit that you typically see within the first 18 months of any module. But really, the difference between those small differences over the life of 25 years add up to some really significant production. So it's the difference between getting 92% of a 365 watt module at year 25 versus only 80%. So what's 12% on a 36 kW module? It's about 40 or 50 watts. If you could say at 25 years this is going to be this is going to be a 330 versus a 280, that's a huge difference. Think about what you would pay for a 280 now versus a 330. So really some profound improvements here on production and yield, and again, they're backing it up with warranty. So you love to see it. Let's keep moving along here. We'll come here to the third major product platform that we're going to talk about today, which is Generac Power Cell. So I like to call this the winning formula, which is energy storage and BMS from Pika. That's a company that had been in the market for quite some time with, in my opinion, they'd always had a really smart mousetrap. They needed a couple more pieces to get this across the finish line and really make this the robust platform it is today. So those other two pieces being monitoring and metering from Neurio. So, Neurio is a company, again, that's been around for a long time as well, that always had really great software and intuition and intelligence on being able to meter and submeter. The question with Neurio was like, well, yeah, that's great. I can meter and monitor all these things, but if my inverter isn't smart enough to know kind of what to do with it, or if I don't have, if I don't have a good storage solution that I'm trying to optimize, it gets to be a really great tool without a lot of practical application. The third component here being controls and customer service from Generac. So you don't need me to tell you these people know power. They know, they know electrical distribution equipment, and they certainly know kind of that installer channel. So really, Generac did the market an incredible service by bringing these three components together and relaunching this solution. So what is the Power Cell solution? I'm an old inverter guy at heart, so we'll start there. Starts with the Power Cell inverter, which is a hybrid inverter capable of simultaneously inverting to AC while charging batteries. To be able to operate in today's environment with module level rapid shutdown, they have a two-part solution. Part one being a PV link, which is a substring optimizer that will optimize output for strings of up to 4 modules. To be able to be code compliant with 2017, they have SnapRS, which is a really, really clever inline shutdown device. It's going to take signals from the PV link, which kind kind of takes grid sense signals from the power cell inverter, and because the PV link is optimizing the substring voltages, is able to communicate to SnapRS to say shut down or keep operating. Back towards the inverter, mentioned the inverter is capable of simultaneously powering AC loads while charging batteries. The battery cabinet and solution is pretty smart. So let's get into that. The battery solution is based on a modular architecture. So one cabinet capable of storing and powering up to 6 battery modules. Each module provides 2.86 kilowatt hours. There is a minimum of 3 modules needed to basically have a viable system. But then from there, you've got I won't say infinite, but you've got a ton of flexibility on how much is the right amount of storage per application. So because you're dealing with smaller chunks, you can really fine tune the amount of storage. You can provide an upgrade path for a customer that, they may go with the 3 module solution now, but in a year when they get that EV, or in 2 years when, I'm trying to think of a good example of something the homeowner would add that you would want to back up. Maybe, maybe the in-laws move back in and you've got more loads and more things to back up. Can really make the solution fine-tuned and modular. And one thing that's great that often gets undersold with discussions around modularity and upgrade paths is you're giving yourself a reason to follow up on customers in the future. You're kind of laying out those Hansel and Gretel breadcrumbs to say, hey, we did this project, last summer. Sounds like the system's running great. We're checking it out on our portal. All signs go, but you may need more power. It looks like you're cycling this every 1.3 days. With a little bit more power, we can give you more autonomy for that next shutdown. You're kind of building in an upgrade path and a reason to turn a customer into a returning and a recurring customer. Up to 96.5% round trip efficient. So that's an incredible number for a DC coupled architecture, and can really bring to bear a large amount of storage on a single supply circuit. So with one single 7.6 kW inverter, think about a 40 amp interconnection breaker, you're able to pair up to 34 kilowatt hours of storage. Now, you've still got to do that math on what's the right amount of storage per inverter? How important is it for me to have long periods of autonomy versus, how quickly could I charge that battery back up? If you've got 3 days of autonomy, but you have, 3 peak hours of sun, that's probably not going to be a great system because you're going to struggle to recharge it off of PV every day. But if you do have all those parameters and you do have access to the right amount of insulation, can really bring a large amount of storage to bear on a congested panel. Or I guess the best way to think about this is you can have a ton of storage without having to call your utility for that service upgrade. Let's go back to the inverter, talk through that. So 2 formats here, a 7600 series and an 11.4. The 7.6 kW units, single phase, it's going to pair to a 40 amp breaker, 97% CEC efficiency. And again, I think what's underappreciated here with Generac is the amount of surge capability they're giving you. So I'm listing this out here in terms of backup current, but the 7.6 has 12 kW of surge capability, which basically is rivaling your quote unquote off-grid inverters in terms of surge capability. Comes with a 10-year warranty, indoor and outdoor rated for flexibility, and not to be undersold here, the 11.4 kW unit will get you 3-phase capability. So for those of you that start working with customers, put together plans, and then realize, oh, this is they've got a 12208 need, or they're trying to back up, I don't know, XYZ, commercial equipment. We've now got an off-the-shelf modular stocked solution for dealing with those installs. So really a great solution here that they've brought to bear. Let's look one more time at kind of how this manifests itself. Again, a power cell inverter, PV links to optimize the strings, snap RSs to provide module level rapid shutdown, a battery enclosure cabinet, and the last piece here being the actual battery packs themselves. So the last slide that I'll be showing is the actual product breakdowns. We left off with Generac, so let's start there. So 2 inverter SKUs, a 7.6 and an 11.4. The battery pack itself, sorry, I said 2.86 earlier, technically 2.85. A cabinet for no less than 3 and up to 6 battery modules. We do include here a battery module space kit, spacer kit. So you may have recalled from that that battery overview slide, if you're using an odd number of battery modules, there is a spacer kit to basically complete the circuit. So that's included for a 3 or a 5 battery module install. The PV Link DC optimizers and the Snap RS shutdown devices. So some combination of those devices, one of the 2 inverters, a cabinet, battery modules to fill, a module spacer kit if needed, PV links for each string, Snap RSs in between each module, you've then got a solution. Again, we're happy to help you guys come up with bills of material for these systems. It may seem a little onerous at first because it's a very different solution than what we're seeing, what we're used to seeing. But I can assure you that the systems go together easily, and it's very easy to fine tune a system for your specific customer's needs. We'll go back up to REC Alpha at the top. So we are stocking the 365. I'm sorry, I've got the wrong part number. We're stocking the 365 Alpha black on white. We have, there are black on black modules available. Those are in really high demand, and they're very tight right now. So we don't have those stocked, but depending upon the size of your project, give us a holler. We'd be happy to run availability for you and come up with a lead time. SolarEdge Energy Hub. So I did not cover this specifically in the slide, but another great breakthrough that SolarEdge was able to bring out with this new platform was, again, by moving that contact point upstream and into the backup interface, they've been able to make it easier to have different inverter sizes. So no longer do we have a one size fits most with the 7600 and the 3.8. But you can have an Energy Hub inverter as small as a 3 kilowatt unit. Similarly, if you've got interconnection troubles and you're trying to avoid a main panel upgrade, they've got a 5 kilowatt unit as well. So right now, currently, we have the 7600 and the 3800 in our inventory. We are waiting for the 3, the 5, and the 6 to become available. But a lot of promise here. No timeline yet on larger inverters like a 10 or an 11.4, but those are on the roadmap from SolarEdge. For the backup interfaces, again, I mentioned there was a 200 amp main breaker option and a backup interface option. For those of you that for those of you that are interested in the solution, give us a call. We'd love to walk through the specifics and really fine tune which of these interfaces is going to fit best for you. A lot of this will boil down to, where are you interconnecting? Is it downstream of your main panel? Are you doing a supply side connection? Is it whole home or partial home backup? So a bit of fine tuning there to be done on bills of material and system designs, but a very capable solution that if you're familiar with storage, that mostly, gets you probably 90% of the way there for building out these systems. That was a lot. That was only 3 product families, but that was 45 minutes. So at this point, we'll take a pause. We'll see what kind of questions have come in. I like to give a shout out to our guy here, the hardest working man in solar. This poor guy signed a stock photography waiver, probably 10 years ago, and he hasn't gotten down off the roof since. So Hannah, we'll turn it over to you. See what kind of questions have come in.